Barbara Morris is an intelligent woman who gathered intelligence on the unintelligent line of intelligent design. She is a professor of philosophy. She is, and it was my fault that said evolutionary biologist in the newsletter. I know better, but I'm so used to evolutionary biologists and we get academics. And I want to tell you, she's also a sweet lady. I never thought that when I hosted a famous philosopher, she'd remind me so much of my Aunt Ida Faye. But we've had a lot of fun this weekend, but much more important, she has exposed the intelligent design people for what they are, not misguided believers, but really corrupt people, and she will tell you about it. So please help me welcome Barbara Morris.
Education Act. It was signed in 2008, and that's what I want to talk to you about. It's a creationist law that allows teachers to bring creationist supplementary materials into the public school science class, in addition to the state-approved textbooks and other materials that they are required to use. And Louisiana is the one and only state that has passed this kind of law. Since they've been promoted. So I'm going to tell you the story of how we got this law, who the players are, and you know, just
find the sound for out there. Could you stand over there for a second? Tell me if those speakers.
I'm going to let you watch a little TV first, if everything works according to plan. You all know who that lady is, and hopefully we've got the mic right there so you can hear it.
Well, the Saints might go marching into New Orleans, but the scientists are marching right out. A group of more than 2,000 biologists has decided not to hold its 2011 annual meeting in the Big Easy. The reason? Louisiana has a law that allows teachers to use supplemental materials in science class, things other than the state-approved curriculum. Republican up-and-comer Bobby Jindal signed it last summer after it passed the state legislature with overwhelming support. The scientific community says the law is nothing more than a free pass for the teaching of creationism and that religion has no place in a biology class. The Times-Picayune reports that Governor Jindal has not responded to the letter from the scientists. Either way, they've already moved on to Utah, where they say the laws protect science. Salt Lake City, more progressive than New Orleans? Now there's a clear argument that evolution exists. That's a page from my notebook. I'm keeping for CBS News.
That was actually one of the very few recognitions outside the state of this law being passed, despite the fact that we were the only state to pass such a law. Texas gets all the publicity. You probably know what's going on there. But she was referring to the governor's signing this law. So I'm going to give you the backstory on this. I call this presentation Back to the Future because Louisiana has been there and done that. We have, this is Governor Jindal. Let's see if my little pointer's not working here. But you recognize him, right? Okay. And standing next to him is Senator Ben Nevers, who actually was the sponsor of the law. And it passed unanimously in the state Senate, and with only 3 dissenting votes, 94-3 in the House of Representatives. So there was virtually no opposition to this bill at all. And the reason it's ironic, I say Back to the Future, because, hang on, she's on this mic, let me right back. Nope, everything's working. Okay. In 1981, Louisiana passed the Balanced Treatment Act requiring the teaching of creation science whenever a teacher taught evolution. And the Supreme Court declared that law unconstitutional in 1987. So we've already done this once, okay? But the legislature passed, and there was even less resistance to this bill than there was to the bill in 1981, which was overtly and blatantly about creation science. I'm going to have to go back over there because this little gizmo is for some reason not working. So I'm just going to go back over there and talk. Okay, sorry. Could be the battery. So, all right. So I'll just speak from over here. These are the gentlemen at the Discovery Institute who are really where this all begins, because ultimately we wouldn't have this piece of legislation if they had not been for the last, since 1999, or actually way before that, so relentlessly promoting intelligent design creationism. There in the upper right, you see Bruce Chapman, who's the Discovery Institute president. That's a conservative think tank in Seattle. And in 1996, teaming up with Stephen Meyer, there to the left, they formed the Center for the Renewal of Science and Culture to promote intelligent design creationism. It's now called the Center for Science and Culture. And there you see a number of people prominently associated with it. The Associate Director, John West, who is a political scientist. Michael Behe, who you probably have heard of. He was one of the expert witnesses for the defense in the Dover case, which was the first legal case about intelligent design. He testified on the creationist side. There's William Dembski to the right, second from the left. And Dembski is one of the most prominent spokesmen for the intelligent design movement. And there to the third gentleman is Jonathan Wells. He is a Mooney who promotes intelligent design. He's one of the few people who has in this group in this movement that has a PhD in biology, but he's never practiced science a day in his life. And there on the end is Philip Johnson. He's a now retired professor from the Berkeley Bolt School of Law, who is the advisor and the chief strategist of the movement. So these are the people that have really been more responsible than anybody else for the resurgence of creationism in the United States in the last 10 years. And two other people there that you see, David DeWolf actually helped write the Louisiana bill, and Casey Luskin is kind of he's a staffer at the Discovery Institute. DeWolf is a law professor at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. Casey actually works at the Discovery Institute. He's kind of their utility infielder. He just kind of does whatever they need him to do. He's mostly the chief propagandist, actually. And you may have heard about their writing. Yeah, there's Ben Stein. You know about the movie, right? I was one of the first people that got a call one of the first people they tried to con into that movie. And it's almost enough to make me believe there's a God to account for the fact that I did not accept an invitation. But they have been hawking what they call a model academic freedom statute on evolution, which has been on their website since 2007. Notice it's called a model academic freedom statute on evolution, right? But there is a religious disclaimer in this bill. It's simply a highly sanitized way of promoting legislation that advances creationism. And in the bill, and this is the one thing that shows up in all of the variants of the legislation, is a religious disclaimer. Nothing in this act shall be construed as promoting any religious doctrine, promoting discrimination for or against a particular set of religious beliefs, or promoting discrimination for or against religion or non-religion. Now, if this were a bill strictly about science, that would not have to be in there. But what you find when you go back, even into the early 1980s, with the creation science legislation that was being promoted in, those types of disclaimers are there, and they're very, very similar, sometimes almost word for word. So this is in the Louisiana law, which is a variant of what the Discovery Institute was advancing in half a dozen states in 2008. The bills are slightly varied to fit the particular demographics of the respective states, but they all have this disclaimer. Discovery Institute was working behind the scenes until the bill was fairly late in the legislative process, and then they surfaced publicly. But they were working with the Louisiana Family Forum, which is the affiliate of Focus on the Family, and I bet all of you know who they are. And so the Louisiana affiliate of Focus on the Family, the Louisiana Family Forum, is run by Reverend Gene Mills, who's the director there on your left, and Darrell White, a former Baton Rouge City Court judge who retired early just so he could do mischief full time for the Louisiana Family Forum. And they, on their website, they describe their mission as to persuasively present biblical principles and the centers of influence on issues affecting the family through research, communication, and networking. Well, the center of biblical influence, of influence for them is a few blocks from their headquarters in Baton Rouge. It's the state capital, and they spend a great deal of time down there. They lobby the legislature aggressively, as they have done since 1999 when they were first established. You know who Tony Perkins is? Family Research Council. He's a Louisiana guy who helped found this group as well. And he's advanced on to the Family Research Council in Washington, but he's still very, very heavily involved with his people. And at the time they were promoting the legislation, and until quite recently, Darrell White had a website, judgewhite.com, and on the website he had a creationism page. And as you can see there, you have lots of links to creationist organizations and material, one of which is the proposed science policy resolution, which was the very, very early template of what he was promoting as part of the legislation. And he also has a link to the Kentucky Creation Museum. I'm sure you know about that organization. So they were openly promoting creationism since their establishment in 99. And even at the time the governor signed the bill, they had a document on their website with links and the names of prominent and some not so prominent creationist organizations and the links so people could go right through the electronic files to those organizations. And this was still on their website in June 2008 when the legislation was signed. Hang on just one second. Now this is Senator Nevers. He is a Louisiana state senator who does not have a college degree. That's not a surprise at all. He's an electrician, and he is one of the most powerful men in the Louisiana legislature. He sponsored the bill, but what happens is the foot soldiers on the ground that are carrying out the will of the Discovery Institute never can quite stay on the playbook. And the strategy for now, what the Discovery Institute has to do, is to, at all costs, avoid the word intelligent design. And you'll see why as we go along. And for heaven's sake, don't use the word creationism. But Senator Nevers, in talking to my hometown newspaper, literally let the cat out of the bag. He said he sponsored the legislation for the Louisiana Family Forum because they believe, look there in red, that scientific data related to creationism should be discussed, right, when dealing with Darwin's theory. And then he got back on track and he used the code words, weaknesses and strengths in both scientific arguments. Now that is the kind of code language that the Discovery Institute is now telling their local, state and local supporters to use. But he screwed up momentarily, right? And that caused them great concern, but only momentarily. If you want the story of the Discovery Institute in great detail, you can. We have a few copies of the book left, and I'll be happy to sign one for you after the program. I want to recognize my co-author Paul Gross. It's Creationism's Trojan Horse: The Wedge of Intelligent Design, and this documents the nature of the intelligent design movement and the strategy as organized by the Discovery Institute. It's actually the book that got me called into the Kitzmiller case, the Dover trial, as an expert witness. Now, if you don't want to buy the book, that's fine. You can go to the Center for Inquiry website, and you can download this for free. It's called Understanding the Intelligent Design Creationist Movement, Its True Nature and Goals. So you can get that in PDF, and it came out about the same time as the paperback edition of the book came out. So you can get the condensed version there. And if you want to see my analysis of the Louisiana Science Education Act, you can go to the Louisiana Coalition for Science website. The Louisiana Coalition for Science is basically me and one other friend. And you can follow the link and type in the search box SB 733, that was the name of the bill, analysis, and you'll get the analysis in PDF. You can download it. LAScienceCoalition.org, and just type in SB 733 analysis. And I have an extensive analysis of the legislation, which I did while I was going through the process. Now, this has all happened, incredibly after the Dover trial. The Kitzmiller versus Dover case was the first legal case involving intelligent design. And my role was to do a number of things, to explain to the judge what the strategy of the Discovery Institute is, which they call the wedge strategy, and also to explain about this creationist textbook of Pandas and People that was being used in the Dover High School library. So we won this case quite quite stunningly. I don't know if you've read the judge's decision, but it was a stunning victory for the forces of science and separation of church and state. And all of the legislators to whom I talked knew about that case. And then they found out, of course, that I had been involved in it. So the ones I was lobbying knew about it, and they still supported this creationist bill in Louisiana. Now, if you want the story of the trial, you can watch it. Actually, you can get it on Google Video now. It's called Judgment Day. It was a NOVA documentary, Judgment Day, Intelligent Design on Trial. And you can get all the details about the trial in that documentary at Google Video. So how did we get this act? What's going on? Despite all that, 1987 Supreme Court ruling, an astonishingly beautifully written 2005 opinion from Judge John Jones in the Dover trial. How is creationism still being advanced in light of those two very effective court rulings? Well, it's being advanced through code language. And here is a list of the Discovery Institute's favorite code terms. One of them is teach the controversy. Let's teach the controversy that's raging within the scientific community about intelligent design. Let's let the kids find out about that. There is no such controversy inside the community of scientists about the status and the health of evolutionary theory, but that's one of their code words. And it's their most popular and their most effective. Another is let's teach the arguments for and against evolution or the arguments for and against neo-Darwinism. Another, the one that's been really big in Texas, is let's teach the strengths and weaknesses of evolution. Now, you saw Senator Nevers use that phrase, right? So he had clearly been coached. He just couldn't quite stay on script. And now the ones that have been most heavily used in Louisiana are the critical analysis of evolution. That is the most prominent code word in terms of which this new bill was written. And also academic freedom. It was first introduced as the Louisiana Academic Freedom Act. And when they realized that there was going to be some opposition to this, they changed the name of the bill to scrub it up a little bit to the Louisiana Science Education Act. So they're now operating in terms of sanitized terminology. This is all about language. So where did we get this bill? Let's go to the Louisiana story. Now let's go to the local level. Well, in Ouachita Parish, you can see the map there, that little red part is in northeast Louisiana. There's a very, very, very conservative parish there, Ouachita Parish, adopted its own academic freedom policy in November 2006. And that's where the camel's nose was under the tent, okay? There was really almost no opposition up there to this. There was no announcement that it was coming up at the school board. A couple of people heard about it accidentally and got down there to try to argue against it. Of course, it did no good. So that happened in November 2006. In 2007, Senator David Vitter, our United States Senator, tried to earmark $100,000 of federal money in a huge national spending bill, earmarked by name for the Louisiana Family Forum to promote their program in Ouachita Parish. Now, has anybody ever heard of Senator Vitter?
Yeah.
Okay, well, for those who haven't, let me introduce you to him. Senator Vitter got caught literally with his pants down in the French Quarter, and this is the madam who said that he was one of their clients. His specific, I don't know what you would call her, lady friend, this is this lady who happens to have the same name as his wife. Now, the lady of the evening is the one on your left. His wife, who has stood by him through all of this, also named Wendy, is the lady on the right. Okay, so this is what he has really most to be famous for. But despite that, he will probably have an easy re-election, in November. But that's his claim to fame there. And the flames represent where, according to his church, he should be going, right? But anyway, what he did was he got found out. A Times-Picayune reporter saw this earmark and wrote a long, really very good story about it. And so what Vitter did, and Americans United for Separation of Church and State, they really got on the beam and they organized just a whole bunch of organizations to lobby Congress to get this earmark taken out. Well, what Vitter did was he didn't remove it. He redirected, of the $100,000, he redirected $30,000 specifically to the Ouachita Parish School Board, which is where it was going to be used anyway. I don't know what happened to the other 70,000. I never had time to follow up on it, but he got caught doing that. But this is where it all started. And a couple of the people at the Louisiana Family Forum actually used to work for Bitter politically. So this is where it really started in Louisiana in 2006 with the Ouachita policy, and then the attempt to fund that policy by David Bitter. So it started with the a policy in one parish or county, and it spread to a legislation initially called Senate Bill 561 and passed as Senate Bill 733 in the Louisiana legislature. And there are Senator Nevers and 3 other senators who were his co-sponsors in the Senate. And of course, waiting in the wings, or helping behind the scenes were Reverend Mills of the Louisiana Family Forum and Darrell White. They were very thickly involved in this. They were coordinating everything behind the scenes with the Discovery Institute. So here are the key players as to how we got this. All of the key people involved. There on your left are Gene Mills and Darrell White of the Louisiana Family Forum. On your right is the Center for Science and Culture at the Discovery Institute, and specifically David DeWolf, the law professor who helped craft the version of the bill that finally passed. Representative Frank Hoffman on the lower right, who was, in 2006, he was the assistant superintendent of the school board out there who helped get that Ouachita policy adopted. And by the time the bill was introduced in the legislature, he was in the Louisiana legislature on the House Education Committee working the bill on the House side. And then in the lower left is a man you'll meet in a little while. His name is Dale Bayard. He's on the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's our State Board of Ed. And he does take his marching orders from the Louisiana Family Forum. He will come up a little bit later. But I will give you 3 guesses, and I think you'll only need one, as to who is the central player in this story. Who do you think? You've got all except one. Who do you think was the most crucial? There you go. My governor who wants to be your president. Okay? All right. There's a cell phone going off somewhere.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So anyway, he was the linchpin in the whole deal. Without him being in the governor's seat, they couldn't have got this bill through. Kathleen Blanco would never have signed it because she didn't believe in teaching creationism in public schools. But Bobby Jindal is a close ally, a very close ally of the Louisiana Family Forum, and they knew that when they got him elected governor, they could put this bill through. And so they waited until he was elected. I'm going to show you just how close to the Louisiana Family Forum he is. And of course, these are some other things that the Louisiana Family Forum have taken credit for. Covenant marriage law, a ban on stem cell research funding, and there's a certain kind of stem cell research in Louisiana that's legal in England, but if a scientist does it in Louisiana, they'll go to prison for 10 years. I mean, this is the kind of legislation that's being passed in Louisiana because Bobby Jindal is letting the Louisiana Family Forum write this legislation, and the legislature is only too happy to pass it. In Louisiana, the journalists in the state don't like to write about Jindal's religion, even though Jindal has used it prominently as a part of his political persona. He's very open about it. He attends church. He's a very, very far-right Catholic. But he goes to church on Sunday in Baptist churches in Louisiana at state expense, in North Louisiana, at state expense in the state helicopter. And he has spent thousands and thousands of dollars doing this. But one journalist for the New York Times, who was based in New Orleans, figured it out and put the pieces together, and in June 2008 wrote a New York Times article about the governor's relationship with the Louisiana Family Forum. And this is the Louisiana Family Forum's own copy of that article. They underlined all the parts that they liked. And they particularly liked the part that you see there in, I'm looking at the time here, we're good. The part that said, at the group's modest offices here, which are only about 3 blocks from the Capitol, Mr. Jindal is seen as practically one of the family. So they sent this out electronically to their supporters. It's just, I have somebody who gets their stuff and then forwards it on to me. And so they were very proud of this article in the New York Times that showed just how close a relationship they had with Bobby Jindal. But it's even closer. Keep watching. Jindal attends all of their events. They don't show up on his official schedule, but neither will he release his schedule to the news media. That's one of the big fights they've had with him. But every year they have a legislative awards dinner, and they give awards to the legislators who vote their way. And Jindal goes to all of these things. And there he is at the 2000 the 2008 dinner after he signed their creationism bill, talking to Gene Mills and Gene's wife in 2008. So he goes to all of their events. And in 2007, when he was elected governor, in November 2007, in December, the next month, they gave a great big Christmas ball to honor him. Now, they invited some other governors as well, former governors, but it was really to showcase Bobby Jindal. And you're going to see Bobby Jindal at this ball. There were ministers all over the place, and you're going to hear a little video clip in a second from Gene Mills. But they have pastors from all over the state who network around the Capitol during the legislative sessions, which they're doing right now. And they were at this ball. And you're going to see them forming prayer circles with some state officials, former governors. And you're going to see Bobby Jindal undergoing the laying on of hands right there at this very prominent, high-profile event. You can go to YouTube and type in Louisiana Family Forum Governor's Christmas Gala, and you can watch the entire YouTube video. And I'm going to show you, there's Gene Mills looking on. He's presiding over the laying on of hands, and there's Bobby Jindal with some pastor or other putting his hands on Jindal's head. And I'm going to show you a little clip from this YouTube video.
An organization you're very familiar with. Very simply said,
can you hear it?
Our role is to be an ambassador. We're sent.
That's Gene Mills talking.
To the policy arena to assist and advise. And that's simply what
prayer circle with Governor Blanco.
And Faith Arena is represented here tonight with over 40 or 45 pastors that have sacrificed and coming from all over the state to be here. And they represent hundreds of others from their community whom they can call together and speak to.
That's Gene Mills. There you go.
God has plans for us we can't even begin to imagine. He has ways for us that are greater than our ways, greater than our thoughts, greater than our dreams. I think he has plans for this state.
Two governors there.
I agree with Gene saying, Brother Gene, this is not a forced thing. How often do you hear people say that? We're a blessed thing. Not just blessed because of the oil and gas, not just blessed because of the waterways, the forests, and the rich soil. We are blessed because of the people. We are blessed because of the prayer of the Holy Spirit that the gathering we've got this room today. I also want to thank you for your witness after those storms.
Thank you for your witness after those storms. He's talking about after Katrina and Rita. For the people, I have to say, the Louisiana Family Forum and other religious groups, they did pitch in. I mean, this was a matter of some urgency, as you well know. But he notice he's not thanking them for their assistance. He's thanking them for their witness. Right? Okay. So now you have a little taste of what's going on in Louisiana there, and there's a bit more. So anyway, we knew Bobby Jindal favored teaching creationism. And there he is during his campaign for governor. And when he ran in 2000 and lost, he had been asked by a New Orleans Times Tribune reporter about whether he favored teaching creationism, and this is what he said. And he said, sure, the teacher wanted to say that creationism is what some people believe and present a range of views. There's nothing wrong with that. A range of views. Now that sounds innocent, right? That's a Discovery Institute soundbite. That's one of their specific sound bites. And it's in my book where that comes from. It's in chapter 8, actually. So he was using their sound bite. Now, how he got it, I don't know, but it's their sound bite. And, of course, in 2007, when he ran again, he was on a public television governor's forum, and he was asked about it again. And he, of course, endorsed it. Let's teach the kids the different theories that are out there for things that aren't explained by science. And of course, it was very clear that he supports teaching creationism. I won't go through the entire quote. So anyway, he signed Senate Bill number 733, that is now law as Act number 473. We had people, I finally put out a call for help from all over the country. We had people writing him from all over the United States asking him to veto the bill. We had 9 national scientific organizations asking him to veto the bill. He ignored all of them. He responded to no one, not even the people from inside his own state. And we found through the National Center for Science Education, which is a clearinghouse for assistance with protecting the teaching of evolution, located in Oakland, California, we found one of his old professors at Brown University. He has a biology degree from Brown University, a biology degree. And we found Professor Arthur Landy, who taught him, I think it was genetics. And Professor Landy made a very nice statement, a public statement, requesting that he veto the bill. he said, when Governor Jindal was in my class studying to be a doctor, because that's what he started out to be at first, he was a very good student. He said, I would hope that he wouldn't do anything in Louisiana to make it more difficult for Louisiana students to become doctors. And that really resonated with me because my son is a doctor, and he was, just about to. He was still just out of medical school at the time, and he had gone through public schools and public university, and he even ignored Professor Landy, and he signed the bill. He ignored everybody. He responds to no one. So I'm going to let you see. Well, I think this one in June 2008. He was asked about this on Face the Nation. So, yes, thank you very much. We will need the sound again.
Make a sharp turn here to a different issue, an issue that has raised some controversy. Now, you were a biology major in college. I think you had a double major, but you were a biology major, and you support the teaching of intelligent design in schools. Do you have doubts about the theory of evolution?
A couple of things. One, I don't think this is something the federal or state government should be imposing its views on local school districts. As a conservative, I think government that's closest to the people and governs best. I think local school boards should be in a position of deciding the curriculum and also deciding what students should be learning. Secondly, I don't think students learn by us withholding information from them. Some want only to teach intelligent design, some only want to teach evolution. I think both views are wrong.
How about you personally? Where do you stand personally on this?
As a parent, or when my kids go to schools, when they go to public schools, I want them to be presented with the best thinking. I want them to be able to make decisions for themselves. I want them to see the best data. I personally think that the human life and the world we live in wasn't created accidentally. I do think that there's a creator. I'm a Christian. I do think that God played a role in creating not only Earth, but mankind. Now, the way that he did it, I certainly want my kids to be exposed to the very best science. I don't want them to I don't want any facts or theories or explanations to be withheld from them because of political correctness. The way we're going to have smart, intelligent kids is expose them to the very best science and let them not only decide, but also let them contribute to that body of knowledge. That's what makes the scientific process so exciting. You get to go there and find facts and data and test what's come before you and challenge those theories.
Okay. Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, described in Republican circles as a Republican superstar, one of the Republicans of the future. Thank you very much, Governor, for joining us.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day.
And to you.
Let me remind you, he's my governor, but he wants to be your president. Okay? Just think that this is in his plans for the future. And it's no secret in Louisiana at all. And that's the last sound clip, so you can relax. Thank you so much. Okay, so now, if you want to hear a couple of interviews that I've done with New Mexicans for Science and Reason, who are just a wonderful pro-science group out in Albuquerque, you can go to lasciencecoalition.org. Again, that's my website, and you can look that up. They entitled the most recent interview they did with me, "What Hath Jindal Done?" And so you can listen to 2 interviews I've done about what's been going on in Louisiana for the last couple of years. Okay, so behind all of this, there was a Discovery Institute the whole time. What they do is they always work through local groups, and then when things become really hot and heated and high profile, they step into the public spotlight, and that's exactly what they did in Louisiana. And so they were watching everything, for a while. They were writing about it on their website. They were watching the passage of the Ouachita Parish Academic Freedom Policy in 2006, and they wrote about it. They were watching these bills in 2008 progress through various state legislatures. In of course, the only one where it passed was Louisiana. But they were watching in this web post, Florida and Louisiana. They were watching those bills go along, and they were criticizing the way the Louisiana media were covering this. And then, when the bill passed, when Governor Jindal signed it on June 25th, 2008, we didn't know about it until June 27th. And the minute it hit the papers that morning, within minutes, this went up on the Discovery Institute's website. They declared their victory. Victory in Louisiana. And I mean, literally within minutes. This went up around 7:15 a.m. in the morning. So they were watching it minute by minute. So our state of Louisiana was deliberately targeted, which I knew it would be. I knew that they were going to go after Louisiana. The Discovery Institute would do this. And they're still watching what goes on there. Here is David DeWolf, who responded. Monroe, Louisiana is up in Ouachita Parish. That's where the Academic Freedom Policy was initially adopted in 2006. And I have a friend up there who's a philosopher and a Catholic who wrote a letter to the paper, the small local paper, very small town, small university town, saying that intelligent design is really not good theology and it's certainly not good Catholic theology. And they were watching that. The Discovery Institute saw that in that very small newspaper and responded to it. And David DeWolf wrote an extensive rebuttal that was carried by the paper, but I got the last word because I got to rebut him. So anyway, they're watching everything, every little thing, and there's more to the story. They're promoting for use around the country, but especially in Louisiana, the Discovery Institute's new high school textbook, Explore Evolution. Notice how they have sanitized the title. But it was written by well-known creationists. Their names are at the top. One of them is Paul Nelson, who's a young Earth creationist, and there are some of those in the intelligent design movement, although most of them are old Earth creationists. The title contains some of the code language, arguments for and against neo-Darwinism, and even though they scrubbed the text of the term intelligent design, you'll see at the bottom, irreducible complexity is in the book very specifically, and that's Michael Behe's contribution to intelligent design, except that it's an old creationist concept. And so what the book does is to use sanitized terminology, try to undermine evolution, and it's based on Jonathan Wells' book, Icons of Evolution, the approach that this book takes to undermine evolution. And it challenges common descent, and it teaches irreducible complexity. So it's very easy to identify as a creationist book, an intelligent design textbook. Now, so what the law does now is to permit teachers to use material like this until they get caught. There are no prohibitions on any type of material. Somebody has to find out about it and report it. And then it has to go through a long, extensive review process, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So what Darrell White at the Louisiana Family Forum has been promoting for the last number of years, along with an old, long-time creationist in the lower left, Charles Voss. I had to fight him when he and a couple of his friends came into my parish of Livingston and tried to get their stuff put into my kids' schools. That's where I first encountered him. Voss has written what he calls textbook addendums. And they are PDF creationist criticisms of 8 or 10 major biology textbooks that are used around Louisiana and around the nation. And he has them posted on the website, and that's from his webpage. One of these, if you followed the case in Knox County, Tennessee recently, one of these has showed up in that case, and it's going to come up again at the Knox County school board meeting on May the 5th. One of Voss's addendums is being used by the parent who filed a complaint against the use of the word myth in his child's biology textbook. And you can go to LAScienceCoalition.org and you can read my post about that case. So this is what's the type of material that's being promoted for use in Louisiana public schools and which is now legal. In fact, the Louisiana Family Forum now has a critical thinking page, critical thinking in the classroom, and they're specifically promoting those textbook addendums you see there, and also an intelligent design DVD that was put out by the Discovery Institute. It's called Investigating Evolution. There you see it being promoted on the Discovery Institute website. So this is what is now legal in the state of Louisiana. Now, this is a teacher who was actually using creationist material in his classroom. His name is Danny Pennington. He was a biology teacher up in Monroe and also helped get that academic freedom policy passed up there. And he was interviewed by National Public Radio in 2008 when all this came up. And there you see on his desk, you see a copy of Icons of Evolution, which is Jonathan Wells' book that tries to undermine the teaching of evolution. There it is, and it's on his desk. He had it out for National Public Radio to see it. And Pennington had written some supplementary material to be used. He gave it to some science teachers up there. I got it through a Freedom of Information request. And it's just a bunch of creationist stuff he pulled off the internet. All of this is now legal in the state of Louisiana. But he was actually using it in fall 2007 in his classroom at West Monroe High School. So after the bill passed, the Louisiana State Board, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, we call it BESE for short, their job was now to order the Department of Education staff, the science division, to write a draft policy to implement the law. And this policy would be placed into Bulletin 741, that you see in the upper left, Section 2304, which is the Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators. It tells teachers and principals and school boards how to conduct themselves under specific laws that are passed by the legislature. And so the Department of Education drafted. Now, most of the people that work in the Department of Ed are former teachers themselves, and they are good people, especially the ones in the science section. They are former science teachers, and they hate this law. And so what they did was to call together an ad hoc committee of expert teachers and scientists from around the state and get suggestions on how to draft this policy. And so they drafted a very good policy, which, had it been enacted, would have cut this law off at the knees. And they put two very important. This was to be presented to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education at its December 2nd, 2008 meeting. And the policy had two very important statements in it. One, the middle underlined in red, religious beliefs shall not be advanced under the guise of encouraging critical thinking. They knew the code language, right? The second one, down at the bottom, materials that teach creationism or intelligent design or that advance the religious belief that a supernatural being created humankind shall be prohibited. Now, when the Louisiana Family Forum got hold of this policy, keep in mind that their point man is a member of the state board himself, Dale Bayer. And what they did between the December 2nd meeting and the upcoming meeting on January 3rd, 2009, the Louisiana Family Forum showed up at the Department of Education with a legislator, probably Senator Navers, and a member of the state board, probably Dale Bayer, and pressured the staff to eliminate those two statements, to scrub it. And you can imagine, now these ladies are sitting there with a state senator right in front of them, a member of the state board. What are they going to do? So what they did was that they agreed to strike the part about critical thinking, but they refused to delete the prohibition against teaching creationism or using materials to teach creationism or intelligent design. They would not do it. So sometime between those two meetings, this all happened. Now, at the January 13th meeting, the Louisiana Family Forum showed up at that meeting loaded for bear. They had their creationist professors with them from a Baptist college up in central Louisiana. They had their attorneys, and they wanted that last statement taken out, and the board unanimously, 10-0, took it out. Now, keep in mind, Dale Bayer is a member of the board, taking his marching orders from the Louisiana Family Forum, but the superintendent of education also went along with this. And when he gave the okay, that was it. The board fell right into line. Now, what is sad and ironic is that in 2002, when the Louisiana Family Forum tried to get evolution disclaimer stickers into our biology books, Paul Pastorek, the Louisiana superintendent of education now, was a member of the board at the time, and he was the president of the board. And he single-handedly got that thing voted down. He says, we're not going to have this. We're not going back to the dark ages in Louisiana. He now is a direct appointee of Bobby Jindal, and he fell right into line. And once he gave the okay and said, we can live with this, that was it. The board enacted this policy with those two protections deleted, and that's what we have now. And of course, there's Dale Bayer. And Casey Luskin was actually calling up the Department of Education about this. He was interfering in this matter from Seattle, presumably. He talked to a woman named Nancy Beaven, who was in charge of that division. So, the very next day, January, the very day after that policy was adopted, Gene Mills, and you can read this on my website also, Gene Mills announced to the American Family Association news service that Louisiana was open for business. Louisiana is open for business, open for creationism, right? So, in February, the very next month, the Society for Integrated and Comparative Biology, which is a national science organization, had written to the governor to ask him to veto the bill, and of course he ignored them the way he did all of the others. So they wrote to him again in February 2009, after that policy was enacted, and they told him that because he had signed the bill, there's his name, and this is their actual letter, that they were not going to hold their 2011 convention in New Orleans. They had been planning to do that. They had a bid on, the hotel and everything. And they had actually held 3 previous conventions in New Orleans. They really wanted to come. And it was especially a sensitive issue with them because of Katrina, right? Everybody now wants to come visit us, and we welcome all of them. But they decided it was a very tough decision for them to make, but they decided they couldn't come and do business in a state that attacked what they themselves do, their discipline and the way it's taught. So they wrote to him and they told him that, and they said that they were going to urge other scientific organizations to do the same thing. Well, guess where they're going? If you remember from Katie Curry's little piece, they said, we're going to Utah. We're going to hold our convention in Utah. Why? Because in 2005, when a state legislator there tried to get a creationism bill passed, their state board adopted a multi-page statement in support of teaching teaching evolutionary biology, teaching evolution. They said it was central to their K through 12 curriculum. They were very upfront about it, and so they're getting rewarded with a major scientific convention. So now, there's a little bit more. The next thing that the Louisiana Family Forum had to come here was the complaint review procedure. What happens, what is going to be the policy governing the situation in which a parent files a complaint about creationist material being used in the classroom? Well, again, the Louisiana Department of Education wrote a very, very good draft policy, but it was only a draft. They don't make policy, they present it to Bessie, and Bessie makes the decision. And their proposal was that the Department of Education would appoint 3 expert reviewers to look at the material, and knowing those people as I now do, they would be appointed real experts. 3 reviewers to look at the material, make recommendations to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education would make a recommendation to the state board. And the Department of Ed could revise it, ignore it, whatever they wanted to do, but the professionals in the Department of Ed, with the advice of expert reviewers, would then make a recommendation to the board. Well, that got changed as well. At another meeting in September of 2009, the Louisiana Family Forum showed up again, loaded for bear, right? And now the policy is that the Louisiana Department of Ed gets only to appoint only 2 reviewers, right? The parent who files the complaint gets to appoint 1 reviewer. The LEA, or the Louisiana Education Authority, the school, or the principal of the school, or the school board, somebody in the school board, gets to appoint a reviewer, and the publisher of the material gets to appoint a reviewer, right? Now, you can just see what's coming, right? So what do we have now? And then, once the Department of Ed makes its recommendation, they don't get to make a recommendation to Bessie. They have to take the reports of those reviewers, which are guaranteed to include creationists, and send those directly to Bessie, without any input, any prerogative to accept, reject, amend, or anything. So this is what we're going to have whenever this does happen. And here, by the way, are the people who went to the board meeting. This was like the first or second week of the semester. I could not go to this meeting, but we had the dean of the College of Basic Sciences from Louisiana State University go to that meeting and ask the board not to do this, and they ignored him. They totally ignored him. These meetings are usually held when those of us who have real jobs, real work to do, are at work, right? And that's the way this happened. So the people there's, of course, Darrell White again. There's Gene Mills. This is Lenny DeToro, a creationist who has been helping them for years. And here is John Aller. He teaches linguistics at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. And he was there arguing to really give the religious right control of this review procedure. And he was also arguing that they needed to allow the use of the materials that were written by Charles Voss. Remember him? The textbook addendums? Specifically, he mentioned that. Now, let me show you who Aller is. Aller is a young earth creationist who here in 2006 was at a conference at the Kentucky Creation Museum with a bunch of other young earthers. This is the kind of people who Bobby Jindal has allowed to commandeer the policy governing the teaching of science in Louisiana, and whom the state board, they're taking their orders from. This is who's running the show. Oops, excuse me. Oh, hang on. Get right back in. Get rid of that. That's just my expenses. So hang on. Now we got it. Sorry. You weren't supposed to see that. Okay. Now let me get back to where we were. Hang on. Oh, let's see. Okay, so this is where we are now. Okay, so we'll have Mama and Daddy. right, file a complaint about something like teaching Explore Evolution, right, the Discovery Institute's book. So mom and daddy then contact the Department of Ed, which is what they're supposed to do, and they get to appoint a reviewer. Now, presumably, these are parents who won't support creationism, but there's no guarantee that they're going to pick a knowledgeable person as their reviewer, right? We don't know who they would pick. And then the principal could pick a reviewer, right? The LEA, the Louisiana Education Authority, could pick a reviewer. The publisher could pick a reviewer, and I just pulled off some icon of a publishing house off the internet. And then, you know who the reviewers would be. They would be people like David DeWolf, or Jeannie Mills, or Charles Voss, or John Aller. And then, when the hearing is actually held, these people can bring other people to the meeting with them. So they can all gang up, right, against the parents, and the Louisiana Department of Ed's role is now completely undercut. Okay, that's the way the policy is written in Louisiana. And so this is what we have at the present time. So in 2009, after this law was passed in Louisiana, the Discovery Institute continued to promote their model bill. And so they introduced, the legislatures in these states introduced versions of that bill. Oklahoma, New Mexico, Florida, again, Iowa, Missouri, and Alabama. It failed in every single one. And wait till you see the final state where it failed. It failed in Texas. It actually failed in Texas. You see? Now, Texas is getting all the publicity because of the Looney Tunes on their school board, their Board of Ed. You know, I mean, these people are seriously out there. And unfortunately, most of them have been, the worst ones were defeated in the most recent election. So there are some intelligent, good people in Texas that wanted these people off the board. But they didn't even pass this bill. Texas didn't want to touch this bill. Now, this year, it was introduced in Kentucky, and it's in a second reading in Missouri, that's where it is now, and in committee in South Carolina. And they have more important things, to worry about, like keeping their governor off the Appalachian Trail. And so it hasn't progressed. But it failed in Kentucky recently. Or actually, it died. It died in committee. So it has not succeeded in any other state except Louisiana. So we're still number one, right? Louisiana is still number one. Does anybody recognize where that video clip of the governor comes from? That was his rebuttal to President Obama. Did anybody watch that? Okay, well that's where I wanted to specifically use that one. Okay. So now we're still number one in promoted creationism. So we get the Booby Prize for that. I mean, I love my state, but I wish we had not done this. And so I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow.
Okay, we can have questions until Bobby says we can't.
Joe, are both mics on up there?
Yes.
Okay, then let me bring this one down here if you don't mind.
Yeah, I have a hot one up here.
Okay, let's come over here to ask questions.
Hang on 1 second. Okay, and I'm going to shut this off and shut this door.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You can turn your projector off, sir, if you want to.
Use my voice.
Or I'll disconnect.
I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it.
There we go. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You said the Louisiana Family Foundation has obviously a lot of influence in the state. Who do they give campaign contributions to and how much?
Oh, that's interesting. What they did, the Louisiana Family Forum is a 501c3. They're not supposed to engage in partisan political activity, despite the fact that they were lobbying all the time. So what they did to make sure they were on the right side of the law, they set up a 501c4 called the Louisiana Family Forum Action. And I don't really know. There's no way to know that they give money directly to people, but they spend a lot of money lobbying. And in Louisiana, party distinctions don't mean anything. There are Democrats and Republicans mixed up in all of this. That's in Louisiana is one state where those distinctions break down. Usually you don't find Democrats mixed up in creationism, but in Louisiana it doesn't really matter. And so what they do, they lobby aggressively. And the way they have their influence is that they publish scorecards after each legislative session. And they show how every legislator voted on their issues. And when and if somebody votes against an issue that they want, they will target them in the next election. In other words, they have a lot of people that they can turn out to vote against them. And one legislator told us that he didn't dare help us when we were lobbying against the bill because he had gone up against him one time and it cost him $60,000. He had to raise. It cost him that much money to keep his seat in Louisiana. That's still a lot of money in Louisiana. So what they do is they make public how these legislators vote, and they are very vocal about when legislators don't vote their way. And they have big dinners every year, and they give awards to the ones who vote the way they want. And they're constantly cultivating them during the year with local recognition ceremonies in different areas of the state. So that's what they do. And they don't have a lot of trouble. Louisiana, as you well know, is very conservative. They'll go along with this kind of stuff. And the ones who don't go along with it are scared to death of the Louisiana Family Forum, and they're scared to death of Bobby Jindal, so they don't put up much of a fight at all.
Yes, I wondered if it should be the Bobby Prize.
The Bobby Prize and the Moody Prize, yeah.
I want to express my appreciation for a magnificently put together presentation.
Oh, thank you.
One of the best I've ever seen.
Now, we have to thank Apple for that.
Oh,
That's Apple Keynote software.
Plus your skill in putting it together. Now, a lot of these people connected with discovery and creationism earn very large salaries. Where does the big money, big donations come from? Is it from Coors Foundation, Richard Mellon State? Where does the big money behind all this come from?
Oh, we have a big part of one of the chapters in the book is exactly about that. They get the Discovery Institute, their largest, when we were writing the book, we found out that they had three major sources of support for this type of program. One was from the Stewardship Foundation, which I couldn't find very much information about. Another one was the Weyerhaeuser Foundation, or the Stewardship Foundation, I think it was, which was funded by one of the Weyerhaeuser family who agreed with their program, the Weyerhaeuser Lumber Company. Yes, ma'am, them. But their largest benefactor is a man in California, in Orange County, named Howard Amundsen. Have you heard of Amundsen out here? Oh, you Californians should know, because every regressive piece of legislation that comes through your legislature, he's putting up money for that. And so Howard Amundsen is their largest financial benefactor, or at least he was at one time. And he probably still is, because he now sits on their board of directors. So he's probably still funding them. He gave them $1.5 million over a 3-year period. So and that was a while back. So that's where most of their money comes from. And I'll tell you, Stephen Meyer, one of the people the director of the Center for Science and Culture, he makes over $100,000 a year. He's well paid for that.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Arda Thehan. I'm just wondering, those people who are celebrating their victories here, have they thought about, be careful what you wish, because if their program becomes a reality in the classroom, I feel most people can overwhelm them. How embarrassing, how stupid, how inane, how nonsensical their position is. I mean, they'll be routed and defeated and humiliated and embarrassed in the classroom, and maybe that will be their final day where they finally fall silent. I'm just wondering whether this has been thought by the
You're thinking about it rationally. This will not happen in the state of Louisiana. Number one, some teacher is probably already doing it, we just don't know about it. Number one, it takes a very sharp kid to understand what's going on, to recognize the material. Number two, we're lucky if teachers teach evolution at all, right? Because they can, even the ones who want to teach it, they're sometimes not well prepared to teach it, and sometimes they don't do it because they don't want to accept the flack that they know that they will encounter for teaching it. But that's not going to happen in any classroom. To overwhelm these people with all of the evidence, the wonderful evidence for evolution. That's not going to happen. It's just not. I wish I could say that it would be that easy, but it's not going to happen. This is purely political, right? And in Louisiana, even teaching jobs teachers are afraid to get involved in these things because everything is so political. And one of the reasons that we got very little help from the teachers in Louisiana, nothing more than a couple of letters from the Louisiana Science Teachers Association, is because they don't get involved. So it would be wonderful if everybody approached it rationally the way you're doing, but that's just not how it works. That's just not how it works.
Hi, Dr. Forrest.
Hi.
I'm just wondering who could be plaintiffs to legally challenge that law, and if anyone has come forward, if anything's happening in that area.
No, not right now. This law is a little trickier in terms of how you handle it legally because it's written in sanitized terminology. You know, it has no overt reference to creationism and no overt reference to intelligent design. It's very easy to show that that's what it is. I've already done it. You can read my analysis of the bill. It's extremely easy to show. But you've got to take that sanitized terminology into a court and convince a judge of that, who may or may not be inclined to look at the historical context of the bill, you see. So there's that. And the best case that we could hope for, and it might be years before we might get one, would be some teacher does something, a child recognizes it, takes it, goes and shows it to mom and dad. Mom and dad are willing, in this very conservative southern state, to do what they need to do to mount a court challenge, and it does happen. I mean, it has happened. And then it goes to court. So our best case would be the specific use of materials in a classroom, so that we would have that as evidence, you know. But we might wait a long time before we get that. So, but that is a good question.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Christine has a question.
Now, you had mentioned that your son or daughter had problems in school. Could you give us a little?
Oh, no, thank goodness they didn't. My son didn't have problems in school. He went through the Louisiana public school system and also went to Louisiana State University and to Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center and became a physician. And my children got a really very good education. It's possible to do that in Louisiana, you know, with good parental support and all of that. And when Bobby Jindal's old genetics teacher said, you know, I hope the governor doesn't do anything to make it more difficult for Louisiana students to become doctors, what he meant was, I hope he doesn't sign this bill. And the way he put it was really particularly meaningful to me because my son had come through the public school system and become a doctor, right? And had some very good teachers, I must say. So, no, thank goodness, didn't have any problems. So did you have another question on
Well, it was kind of off-center. You had mentioned that one of the arguments that the creationist was using was called irreducible complexity, and I've never had that argument told to me in terms that I can understand.
Let me give you a quick definition of that. Irreducible complexity means that the structure of a biological organism, like the little tail on the bacterium that allows it to swim, the flagellum, is so complex that it could not be put together by evolutionary processes in a piecemeal fashion over long periods of time. That little gizmo is so complex that all of its parts have to be put together in place at the same time for it to function. And if any of the parts is missing, it won't function. And that's what irreducible complexity means. And what Michael Behe has done is apply that at the level of molecular biology. It used to be applied at the level of anatomy. You know, if you have a respiratory system and you take out some essential part of it, it's not going to function. But it's an old creationist argument that a designer, a special supernatural designer, namely God, is required to make these complicated little structures. That's what it is.
So you're saying that instead of things starting out simple and getting complex, they start out complex?
Exactly. They're put together in their complex structure by a supernatural designer. Yes, ma'am, that's exactly it. That's it. You got it. So, you got it.
That's like banks too big to fail.
Yeah. Well, I can be around until 1:15. That's when we have to leave for the airport. So what time is it now?
It is
about 12:15, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I can be here for another hour if anybody would like to buy a book.
And the food is not yet here. I take it. So If there are more questions.
I have a question, but I'll just speak loudly. Oh, sure. What do you think it is about Louisiana as compared to the other states in the South, like South Carolina, where I'm from?
Right.
Why is it that Louisiana is prone to have had this legislation passed?
Okay, there are a number of reasons, and it's a number of things working together. The reason this bill passed when it did is because, number one, the Louisiana Family Forum had been lobbying the legislature on their issues for 10 years. And they had been promoting creationism, writing letters to the paper and things like that for a period of time. And all they had to do was to get the right governor, right? So all of their lobbying efforts were in place, and they just needed the governor. So there was that. Also, Louisiana is a very conservative state, right? And we have a long tradition of private schools, okay? A lot of people send their kids to Catholic schools and white Christian academies and things like that. So even though the public schools still educate most of the children, we probably have a stronger tradition of private education than most people in the country because we were settled by Catholics in the south part of New England. Strong Catholic school tradition, and they're good schools, and they probably teach evolution, by the way. So that there is less public support for public education. There is a very low level of literacy in Louisiana. There's an extremely low level of science literacy. Louisiana is more conservative now than it's ever been. It's extremely red. It's very, very red. And then also, there is no organized resistance to this type of activity. Every state in which these other bills failed, had organized pro-science citizen groups in place. I have made 2 efforts to organize such groups among people who support what I'm doing. And so far, no one is willing to put in the personal time it would take to get a group together, to organize it, and to work against this type of thing. The only thing we now have is, and it was partly as a result of this bill, and it was done completely independent of me, is a small chapter of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. But they're very small. They all have constructive day jobs to do, So there is, even among the science community, sat this out. And they didn't do what other scientists have done with these things. They didn't organize. They didn't write petitions. We got some letters. I don't know how many. We had a few really wonderful scientists that came down and testified for us, but the great majority of scientists in Louisiana simply sat it out, and they're still sitting it out. There's just no organized opposition whatsoever. I think if there had been more, we might have had better success, but I don't know. Louisiana is in some ways unique for this type of stuff. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what is it's a very strange bedfellows that I see in the American political scene. Very consistent.
Is it a question?
Yeah, a question?
It's a question.
Okay.
If you will. Yes, it is. I'm going to ask you, what is your explanation as to why business, which needs science, always gets allied with religion, which is anti-science? In the political arena. Do you have an explanation for that?
I don't know if I can give you a really good one. There's a long, if you have read Susan Jacoby's wonderful book called Freethinkers, and she has another wonderful book called The Age of American Unreason, I think it is, she talks about the fact that in the history of the United States, conservative Christianity has traditionally been allied with free market fundamentalism, the free market forces, and so that we have a history of that in this country.
How many years is it?
Ever since we've had powerful corporations, and Susan Jacoby does a very good job of explaining this. In Louisiana, the business community, as you know, tends to run very conservative. The religious right is politically conservative. And so they are aligned on a number of issues. The Louisiana Family Forum, for example, they are free market fundamentalists. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to support public education. They want tax cuts, and this is another thing that has hurt in Louisiana. We've had some drastic, draconian tax cuts. They are not only biblical fundamentalists, they are free market fundamentalists. They are anti-tax, anti-public institutions of any kind. And unfortunately, their views are very consistent with organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, I have to say. And so they have traditionally been allies. One of the arguments that people like to make is if you adopt this creationism bill, businesses are not going to want to come here. That never happens. The businesses don't care. And in fact, this step that was taken by the scientific organization, the Society for Integrated and Comparative Biology, that's the first and only move of that kind I have ever seen, and I've been working this issue now for over a decade. They don't care. They don't care what's going on in the public schools, really.
Okay, Dr. Forrest, thank you very much. I have a question for you, because when I grew up, one side of my family was Catholic and one side was Protestant. Mm-hmm. So I was always under the impression, perhaps false, that the Catholic Church didn't have a real problem with evolution.
They don't.
It was a Protestant issue.
That's right. Largely it is.
And so Louisiana kind of threw me back when this all happened, because I thought Louisiana was very strongly Catholic.
In the southern part of the state, it is.
Okay, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because that, I thought they would not have that problem, because the Catholic Church would just say it's not an issue.
Okay. With the church, it's really not. The church long ago made its peace with the teaching of evolution. It depends on how conservative the Catholics are that we're talking about. Michael Behe of the Discovery Institute is a very conservative Catholic. And there is a contingent of very conservative Catholics in the creationism movement, because they have other issues in common that they want to work for together. And the governor is a very conservative Catholic, okay? And Louisiana is a conservative state. So on this issue, they are out of step with their own church. They are at odds with their own church. But it is politically, for Jindal, a very good position to take, because he knows that people in Louisiana are largely scientifically illiterate, unfortunately. They are largely conservative, and that it was not going to hurt him one bit, and he's worried about that. In fact, it would probably got him some votes, you see. So even though they are at odds with the official position of their church, the Catholic Church, they are politically very conservative, and they see an advantage in supporting creationism because of their conservative politics, which puts them at odds with their church. It is mostly, though, creationism is mostly a Protestant, fundamentalist, and evangelical issue. Those are the people who really, truly object to it, so you're right about that. But there is a contingent of conservative Catholics.
There are no more questions. I have one.
All right.
Of you and of Dr. John Suarez in the back row. Would some good California green money help the Americans United chapter in Louisiana get something done?
Anything would help. Anything would help.
And how would we do that? Go to the Americans United side?
You could join and support them that way, or you could make contributions. I'm not sure yet, right now, what would be the mechanism through which they could accept contributions. I think they would have to check with the national office, so I wouldn't want to say anything about that.
Yeah, well, that's the case. If you can tell us, I'll tell you, Bobby, how to do it. Okay. I gathered from Barbara that the basic problem is that the chapter in Louisiana is small.
Very, very small.
And so that money obviously would help, but a lot more than that is needed to...
Yeah, the real problem we have is manpower. When you only have a few people who all have jobs. See, the creationists, they seem never to have jobs. They do this full time. They are taken care of through their foundations. Gene Mills makes his living doing this through the Louisiana Family Forum. And so it's a wonderful thought, Bobby. Thank you so much, and I'm sure that they would be happy to accept this assistance. They are running low on funds. I know that they are. So if they wanted to do something, they wouldn't have very much money to do it. But the best way to do it would be to contact either John or me and let us check with the national office and find out about that. And thank you so. That was a very kind-hearted gesture. Thank you so much.
I'll be happy to.
And John,
I have a comment in addition, Bobby. Americans United for Separation of Church and State, that you all know, both Barbara and I are on the national board. The board consists of 15 members. 3 of them, namely Barbara, myself, and Eddie Tabash, whom you all know. He couldn't be here today. We are the free-thinking caucus within the board of Americans United. So AU is well represented through the 3 of us within the board.
Yes.
I just wanted to make that clear.
And I have to say, Americans United, in addition to the National Center for Science Education,